Hi, this is my Bahamas mission trip flight scenario created by Leah Riggin for Aviation 315 Commercial Ground. First of all, when we are traveling to the Bahamas, it was important to note what pilot requirements we needed in our documentation. We will actually be needing a passport. We also need a pilot certificate that does have an English endorsement, and we will need our medical. And just to ensure that's up to date, I wanted to point out that if pilots are using basic med, they are still welcome to fly to the Bahamas. For the Bahamas specifically, they'd like you to have a restricted radio telephone operator's permit, and you can find more information on that at the links I've provided for my resources. And also, they're needing a letter of authorization if the aircraft is not registered in the pilot's name. As far as passenger requirements go, each passenger will also need a current passport. If for some reason you do have children traveling, or someone is just using my PowerPoint for future reference, it is important to note that they will have to have a notarized statement by their parent if they are traveling with someone else. As far as U.S. aircraft goes for the Bahamas, we need a standard airworthiness certificate, and that will have to be a Bahamas Civilian Aviation Department as a standard validation of the Special Airworthiness Certificate for experimental and amateur built aircraft. We also need to ensure a permanent registration certificate is in our aircraft, that we have a radio station license, because we are now flying technically out of the States. We need our operating limitations information, weight and balance information. We do have to carry survival gear, including a life vest and flotation device, as we are flying over the sea. We'll have to have an ID data plate and ensure our tail numbers are 12 inches high. And we also will need to ensure that we have an altitude reporting transponder or an altitude encoding transponder, and that we can have communications on our ELT for any emergencies and be able to squawk or use our frequency 121.5. As far as Customs and Border Protection goes, there is an annual user fee that will allow a few weeks, or you'll need to allow a few weeks to receive. And for decals, you can call this number or email decals@dhs.gov for more information. Also, when we go to the Bahamas, we will have to fill out an EOPIS, which is a lengthy form where you can put in your personal information, your aircraft's information. You're going to be listing your airports that you'll be leaving from and going to travel to, and this form will come in handy. So it's going to be something you're going to need throughout the whole process of traveling to the Bahamas. If you need more information, there is a great YouTube video on how to fill this out. And we'll also need to remember our password and username, because we're going to have to be filling it out as we come back to the States. As far as mitigating factors go for our trip to the Bahamas, I wanted to include PAVE because we need to make sure that we're rested, current. We have our type rating for this aircraft we're using, and cover our I'm safe basis. As far as the aircraft goes, we do want to just ensure its airworthiness, registration, and performance. For environment, we will be flying over the ocean, so it's just something to take into consideration if we've never done that before. We are going into an environment that a hurricane has come through, so we definitely want to keep that kind of destruction in mind and the weather moving forward. External factors, I considered pressure to accomplish as this is a mission trip and it's going to feel like we have to get there and we have to get these supplies there, but we have to maintain safety or regardless, no one's going to make it or the supplies could easily not make it. Our mitigating factors, definitely want to check those NOTAMs, our weather, and obtain any current METARs and TAFs. Definitely want to keep an eye out just in case something's going on. And then any non-ATC delays, checking for those delays at various airports as they could be closed. We want to double check our runway links and verify the links of the airports that we intend on using. I chose the alternates Linden, Pendling International, and the Governor's Harbor just due to the route that I'm taking and that Governor's Harbor has fuel. Fuel, we will have to use our amount that I'm about to show you for the flight plan, and keep in mind that we will be flying during the day, which requires us to have 45 minutes of reserve. And again, just that takeoff and landing distance and just verifying our performance calculations for the day with our aircraft. For my departure leg, I wanted to travel from Fort Lauderdale, which is KFEX, and go to MYEH, which is North Eleuthera. And I chose that one because it is an entry point, but they also do have fuel. This distance was going to end up being 194 nautical miles, take a little over an hour at a fuel burn of 432 pounds per hour, requiring 484 pounds of fuel. For the legs of getting into the Bahamas to Arthurstown, I did consider using normal cruise. For the second leg, from traveling to the North Euthira, we will be going over to Arthurstown, which is MYCA. This distance ended up being 75 nautical miles, taking a little less than an hour, with a fuel burn of 432 pounds per hour, requiring 186 pounds of fuel, and also still considering using the economy, or excuse me, normal cruise for that as well. Once we are actually in the country, there are certain requirements that we have to follow, so I wanted to include those operations. There is no VFR night flying. That's completely prohibited in the Bahamas, especially during sunset to sunrise. You may fly IFR, but you'd have to fill out a flight plan for that. The airspace around Nassau and Freeport requires VFR minimums of 1,500, 3 miles and clear of clouds. The uncontrolled airspace at VFR minimums are different from the US, so it's important to note that it's now 1,000 feet, 1 mile clear of clouds, and you want to keep in sight of land or water. Also, Freeport's tower uses a specific radio, the 122.3. The operations within 50 nautical miles of the radius of Nassau uses 128.0. And for other locations that are a little more remote, you'll want to use 124.2. And some of the remote sites are listed here, and I just thought this was really important to note, as if you get there and if you decide that you need to go somewhere else or something. It's important to always identify your location while you're there when you are speaking on the radio, because some of these locations are so remote. and just remembering to use 1000 MSL as a base communication altitude and add 80 feet to that base for each nautical mile distant from the nearest remote site. You can use 124.2. So for operational concerns, as far as airport conditions, we have had a disaster and the airports may be damaged or closed. I thought it's very crucial to know which airports are open. That's why we want to keep an eye on those NOTAMs. Relief organization and pilots need up-to-date information so we can make sure that we get there and deliver the supplies. Fuel availability, because some airports may be closed, then we may not be able to get fuel. So definitely just want to keep that in mind. As far as ATC goes, you definitely want to check to make sure they are in operation. Sometimes in the Bahamas, ATC services can be disrupted after a hurricane, so just keeping an eye on those NOTAMs. Any special procedures, we want to be aware of anything like that or airspace restrictions related to a hurricane, and knowing that we may establish temporary flight restrictions or other airspace limitations to facilitate relief efforts may be in effect. As far as risk assessment, assess the risk associated with flying into an area affected by the hurricane, because weather, terrain, and other various hazards are going to be out there. For my return leg, I considered using the economy cruise, and that resulted in flying from back to North Eleuthera again, and we're going to be flying right back into Fort Lauderdale, and we have to use these because they're both entry points. That leaving us with a distance of 194 nautical miles. The time was going to be about an hour and a half with a fuel burn of 355 pounds per hour, and resulting in needing 465 pounds of fuel. As far as going back inbound to the US, I wanted to make sure I included some important facts. We're not done yet. We still have some things that we have to do, especially making sure you get that EAPIS manifest filled out at least 1 hour prior to departure. And again, you can only depart from an airport of entry. You have to have a copy of the Bahamas custom forms, and they do want you to pay a departure tax of $29 a person. You can call the U.S. Customs to get your special code that you'll need while flying. And for filing any flight plans, you can contact Nassau Radio or the Freeport Radio. As far as VFR flights, you must receive a discrete transponder code from FSS 126.7 Miami Radio before penetrating the ADIS. Flight service is responsible, but not approach control. And prior to landing, you need to make sure you ensure your to close your flight plan. You must land again back at an airport of entry in Florida, which is why I chose Fort Lauderdale. Take all baggage to customs and then prepare necessary documents for U.S. arrival as needed. Here are my resources where you can find any and all other information as well. Thank you. Have a blessed summer.